streamers are going to be able to make content, pin abstract apps on those streams, and ultimately make content to their user base around those products built on Abstract. It's very much the first time that crypto has ever, automated the flywheel and really benefited and tried to point rewards specifically around content creators. Now, this seems pretty ridiculous to me because if you look at, how the biggest businesses in the world have been built, 5 out of 10 of them have all been around rewarding and fostering the content creator. Yet nobody in crypto has ever done it before. It's pretty strange. And this is the part that I'm most excited about.
Nothing said on dYdX Research is a recommendation to buy or sell securities or tokens. This podcast is for informational purposes only, and any views expressed by anyone on the show are solely our opinions, not financial advice. Boccaccio, Ryan, and our guests may hold positions in the companies, funds, or projects discussed. What's up, guys? Welcome back to another episode of dYdX Research. Today I'm joined by Luca Netz from Igloo Inc., Abstract Chain, and Pudgy Penguins. Thanks for coming on the show, Luca.
Hey, happy to be here.
I guess today's main focus will kind of be Abstract Chain. I know you have a lot of businesses out now, but why did you guys decide to build out Abstract Chain? What was the main purpose behind it?
I think from our perspective, we kind of realize that all the blockchains are being commoditized, and ultimately what Pudgy Penguins in our community has is, I think, the proprietary things that I think are ultimately going to be differentiated and differentiate chains moving forward, which is community, culture, operational excellence, every ingredient that I think is needed to make a successful blockchain ecosystem. We already have via the community and the culture that we've cultivated over the last couple of years. So in a world where, we have the moat, why and go bring that moat to another ecosystem for pennies on the dollar? Didn't make any sense. Now, that was the initial thesis and why we did it. What ultimately has transpired since building Abstract has been, the L2s, are doing, I think, everything wrong with the exception of Base. Now, it's important to note, I don't look at ZK Sync or Arbitrum and Optimism as true L2s, cultural hubs, as Vitalik would define them. I look at them as tech stacks and nucleuses to these culture hubs that ultimately have their core differentiating factor. So remove Optimism, ZK Sync, and Arbitrum from the equation, and I think the only competitor and the only L2 doing anything worth anything is Base, and I think they're putting on an absolute masterclass. But in a world where I think L2s are a scaling solution for Ethereum, they are the future. And looking at the landscape, I realized, well, this race is yet to be won. And to be frank, it's an open ocean. And I think a lot of how people are building them are in the wrong spirit and in the wrong mindset. And I think there's a lot of room for disruption, not only to bring, a bar none community culture and ecosystem to the L2 landscape, but ultimately to bring a new, fresh perspective on how I think L2s are going to be built moving forward. And so you're going to see this by the time this launches, Abstract will be live. You guys will see what I think is, crypto's first ever true crypto consumer terminal and interface that I think ultimately is going to set the bar and set the tone for, how people look at blockchain ecosystems moving forward.
Fantastic. I agree with everything you said, but I wanted to ask a specific thing is consumer-centric, which is something you write about. And you actually wrote a pretty opinionated article on it back in September 2024. Why? I understand why you want to go with consumer-centric, but can you kind of run over your arguments on why you think it's necessary that this happens? And you talked a bit about cultural hubs as well, and I think that would tie in well together.
Yeah, I think the experiences are just kind of shit today. So if I were to compare, give you a good anecdote, let's just look at social networks and compare them to blockchains, right? Blockchains today very much feel like 4chan. Right? Where it's if you know how to navigate and you know how to put the pieces together, it can be super useful, right? However, if you don't know how to navigate, right, it could also be super harmful. In 4chan's, case, you go somewhere where you shouldn't probably go. That doesn't make you feel too good. In blockchain's perspective, you get fished and lose all your money, right? And so I think from our perspective, there's a huge room to kind of disrupt, what feels like 4chan today and to make Instagram. And what I feel that looks like ultimately comes down to the UX, UI, and the interface and how people are participating on chain. When you think about it, every chain should have one domain, one central place where you go to do everything on that platform, right? There shouldn't have to be pieces of puzzles you put together, whether it's a wallet extension, right? And then, a certain app that you enjoy. Right now, it's very much a free-for-all. And ultimately, if you understand the consumer experience to break through to true adoption, we're talking tens of millions of DAU, really participating on chain actively outside of the current existing user base. It needs to be super simple and stupid. I mean, it has to be something I think Abstract's going to be the first thing specifically on EVM that you're ever going to feel where I think if you went to your local waiter and barista and you told them to commit an action, by going to this one singular domain, they could be able to do it pretty quickly. Versus right now, if you tell your local barista or waiter to go do an action on Ethereum, I think it's going to be very difficult for them to do and figure out, and probably would take a couple hours, right? And so how do you remove that onboarding from a couple hours of figuring things out to 5 minutes, as simple as a monkey could do it, and that is ultimately where this stuff has to go. I think people just don't I think they underestimate or overestimate how smart I think the regular person is, specifically when it comes to being technically savvy. You just have to understand the reality of it, right? Like, that's not a thing I say proudly. Like, it's just ultimately understanding people, right? And understanding what a majority of people know how to consume, right? A majority of people today in America are north of 35 years old. If you're north of 35 years old, you are not, internet native. You're not digitally native. You still maybe type in text with one finger, right? Like, just because, our group and our sphere of influence doesn't behave that way doesn't mean that a majority of the world doesn't, right? A majority of the world still does that. And, if you want to bring them on chain, you got to make it easier.
That makes sense. And what are you guys doing specifically to make that happen, to make it
Yeah,
easier?
I think what you're going to see here, and probably when this comes out and people hold me accountable, like, I think you're going to see this hub of fun, the singular destination where somebody can log in via an email and a password, get a smart wallet, and then just participate in an ecosystem pretty seamlessly and know how to do things and where to go, with a simple interface. And I think this is how a majority of consumer blockchains moving forward are going to be built. And ultimately, anybody that I think is building a purpose-built blockchain is going to go in this direction. And so, what you're going to see is an ecosystem predicated around fun. This is not a general purpose ecosystem. You won't be able to do every single thing. We're really focusing on discretionary spending, specifically fun in layman's terms. We're focusing on the best 0-to-1 onboarding. I think you will see and experience the best 0-to-1 onboarding, I think, from any ecosystem in Abstract. And I think you'll see something that is cohesive and curated and easily digestible, right? And something that I think you could show to a friend or a family member who's not crypto native that's going to make a lot of sense to them. Obviously, there's some natural properties like getting money, on the chain, things like that are still like barriers that we ultimately need to improve and make better. Naturally, putting money on an L2 has never been the easiest process. It's probably one of the pain points and things that we're going to work on the most, post this launch. But yeah, I think interface, brand, community is ultimately going to be the name of the game for people who are competing in the blockchain space.
Yeah, that makes sense. And it's kind of a meme now, this Ethereum aligned thing, but you guys are using Celestia while a bunch of other L2s chose to use Ethereum. Is there any specific reason for this, or is it you don't think it matters too much?
I think it's just the experience, right? Like, I just have to optimize for the fastest transaction and the cheapest fee, and using an alt DA layer just ultimately gets me there.
That makes sense. Incentivizing users, making them come on chain and actually onboard to the L2. How are you guys thinking about this? I know you have a pretty comprehensive XP program, but do you want to kind of talk about that?
Yeah, I think the one that I'm most excited about, and I'll let like the users, and our ecosystem holders figure out exactly how we're integrating there, and we'll obviously communicate that. But the part that I think is going to be the biggest reinvention is the flywheel and the incentives that we're giving to streamers and content creators. Essentially, there's going to be a stream button on the platform, right? Streamers are going to be able to make content, pin Abstract apps on those streams, and ultimately make content to their user base around those products built on Abstract. It's very much the first time that crypto has ever, automated the flywheel and really benefited and tried to point rewards specifically around content creators. Now, this seems pretty ridiculous to me because if you look at, how the biggest businesses in the world have been built, 5 out of 10 of them have all been around rewarding and fostering the content creator. Yet nobody in crypto has ever done it before. It's pretty strange. And this is the part that I'm most excited about, right? Because it's like, how do you take a concentrated group of content creators, 1,000, 1,500, 2,000 people, give them an allocation of, Abstract supply if and when that TGEs and goes to the world? And how do you ultimately create some sort of flywheel where it's like, hey, advertise and make content around the network and, leverage that flywheel to ultimately find PMF for apps on the network? That system right then and there, it's like the stake and kick model, right? You get kick, you lost lead on kick on the stream, and then you get all the PMF on stake. The difference is we don't have a stake. Our stake is all the apps that are building on our chain, right? And we curate that really well, and we try to make that experience a little bit, as much to best of our ability around fun, which I think taps the same nerve that kind of stake does. So it's going to be an interesting reinvention, but I think anyone who's streaming on the platform over the next couple of months would make more money if they streamed on Abstract versus if they streamed anywhere else. That's whether Twitch or Kick, with maybe the exception of the top guys in those respective networks who obviously have 9-figure deals.
Very cool. Maybe we'll put the 0x Research show on it and try and make some money as well. Curation is something you've brought up a few times. What do you mean by curation? As in the ecosystem, you guys are handpicking what apps to work with, how to help them out, or is it something different?
I mean, anyone can deploy an Abstract, but to be on that portal, it has to meet a certain bar. It has to fit the thesis, right? So, like, I'm not stopping anyone from making deployments. That's everyone's prerogative. But it's kind of like the App Store, right? You got to hit a certain threshold of something to be on the App Store. Got to make sure it's to the best of your ability. Make sure it's safe. Make sure the people are doxxed. Make sure they have the right intentions. Obviously, you can't filter every single person that way, but it is important that there's some sort of bar of quality, so it's not a complete cesspool of whatever.
Yeah, I agree with you. I don't think you can allow people, especially if you want to make it a consumer-centric blockchain, you can't have allow everybody to just deploy apps and then for that to be on the front page. How much support are you offering those that you are going to put on the front page? Are you very active in that development?
Well, I think I'll let the builders speak for themselves, but I think we have the best ecosystem team, the best DevRel team in on the EVM, hands down. I think that you just look at our ecosystem, and I think you believe that by just like paying attention to who's building on Abstract, who's a part of this. I think it's relatively self-explanatory in that respect. So from our perspective, we are very much harnessing the power of builders and nurturing builders in a way that I think is unparalleled. Speaking of that, I have a mentorship program with 100 builders starting from 7 p.m. Eastern all the way to 8:30. So, and that's happening in a couple hours. So I think there's very few founding teams that are actually doing that. Maybe they delegate that to a person or two, but we're going to have the whole executive team on there, answering questions, helping people, and trying to steer them in the right direction.
That makes sense. And one thing you mentioned previously was that Base is the only L2 that is doing well. Are you guys taking anything from Base? And what do you think the other L2s have messed up so badly? Because I agree with you, but I just want to hear why you think so.
I think a majority of the other L2s just wanted to tap into a narrative or focus too much on tech and didn't really figure out their identity. I think Base is putting on a clinic of operational excellence. I mean, it just speaks to the entrepreneur that Jesse is and the rest of the team there. They are quite literally putting on an operational clinic that's not just predicated around succeeding in the L2 land. I think there's very few chains, if any, with the exception of Solana, that are putting on the clinic that Base is putting on. I mean, it's really just truly, if you pay attention, very few people in the entire space are shipping anything of that magnitude. And so it's not going to be an easy race. I think for the first time building in crypto, I actually have a North Star, someone that I'm striving to be. Typically in NFT land and meme land, I feel like we're just kind of innovating and setting the playbook and everyone's following us. So it's nice to have a North Star for once. But I do think Base has Achilles heels. I think there's things that they just won't be able to succeed at. And I ultimately believe, targeting fun and discretionary spending and not spreading myself thin, trying to accomplish a general purpose thesis is ultimately going to be the reason why we win.
That makes sense. Fun and discretionary spending. Does this tie into how many gaming projects I'm seeing on Abstract? It feels like it's the first time I've seen a chain have this much gaming apart from Ronin.
Yeah, we love gaming. I obviously believe in the future of gaming as a huge way to ultimately penetrate the mainstream. I think gaming has been underserved. And so gaming is huge for us. AI is huge for us. NFTs and memes and those teams are huge for us. Betting is huge for us right now. I think there's a lot of different facets in which we have the best ecosystem, gaming being one of them.
And on day one, how many of these do you expect to be live?
I think 45 apps will be live day one is our goal. But we have 120 in the pipeline, 130. So I think within the first month, you'll see 60 or 70 deployments. Probably within the second month, I think all 120 will be deployed. And hopefully there's a whole new cohort that's coming in shortly after launch.
Very good. And are you going to be doing, we've seen a lot of accelerated programs. I think a lot of chains have realized what you've clearly realized a while ago, which is that you need applications. And they're bringing in a lot of cohort programs and a lot of accelerator programs. Are you guys going to be doing this throughout, or is this?
Yeah, we have a little builder in residence program, but ultimately what builders want is they want PMF. They want marketing. And so the beauty about having one central destination in which the ecosystem lives, it also makes me, as an internet marketer, it allows me to have one thing that I point all the traffic to, right? So it's really easy to run advertisements, right? If I'm selling, Abstract portal as the hub of fun, right? Fun is universal. And so I can market that to Web 2, I can market that to Web 3. And I don't need to point them to 19 different directions and 19 different applications. I point them to one, right? One domain, one website where they can onboard, transact, and participate within 5 minutes, right? And so that's going to give me an edge. And what builders want is they want PMF. They don't want grants. They don't want anything else. Everybody does all those other things because they don't know how to get their builders PMF. Ultimately, a change responsibility in my mind, it kind of starts and stops with being like a publisher, right? Like no chain provides any reasonable edge. Again, with probably the exception of Solana, right? Who just like mastered the fast transactions and things like that. But on EVM specifically, like no L2 is giving you any technical edge, in my opinion. Right? They all do relatively the same thing. And so how you're going to win there specifically is PMF and marketing. And because of how we thought of it, I think we're just in a league of our own here.
That makes sense. And in terms of UX, this idea of having a single portal and abstracting away quite a bit of stuff, how did you guys come up with that? What was your main inspiration?
Well, it actually came down to the marketing. So the thought process was like, okay, I'm a builder. I've been offered 8-figure grants to go build on chains, right? Like, what do I want from these chains more than the money? I want marketing. I want them to help me see my products come to life. And so then I thought to myself, I was like, well, I can build up like a marketing agency. I think I'm one of the best marketers in the world. People who know me would probably say the same. Right. And so I was like, that's our edge. Like our edge in crypto is that we have the best branding team, the best community team, and the best marketing team. That's why we've succeeded. So how do we lean into those edges, which I think are very much the proprietary edges that any company can have in the space, figuring that I think with AI, all the tech will be commoditized way quicker than people anticipate. Right. So how do I go bring that to them? Right. Well, I launched Pengu to galvanize the Pudgy community. The Pudgy community has never been more excited for Abstract. So I got the best community in crypto, rallying behind all of these apps. So that's one. Right. The second one was, okay, how do I actually go bring people outside of Web3 from Web2 into these applications? And the part that I got really overwhelmed by was this idea that, running a successful marketing campaign or campaigns for one project is incredibly difficult. Doing it for 10 is nearly impossible. I mean, some of our executive team comes from the agency business, having huge agencies prior to this. But that's just not a business we want to get into again, nor a lift that we really wanted to incur. And so it came down to like, well, what if I sold the idea of digital Disneyland or a hub of fun, and everything that, within the ecosystem that we thought met that criteria lived in one destination? And based on the experience and the products that they build, the users will basically find the PMF, right? The runoff will come accordingly, based on who actually has the best application. And then we tied in the streaming. And so now people are going to come to Abstract, not to go and participate in the ecosystem, but to watch their favorite streamer. And then their favorite streamer is incentivized bigly to go and pin the apps and market the apps on the stream, right? Which, if the app is good, then brings their entire audience to go use the apps that are on the platform. And so all of a sudden you have a flywheel that I think crypto's never seen before. And I'm really excited to, I think, set the tone here in a way that I think is going to surprise a lot of people.
I assume you guys have a interesting mobile strategy as well. It sounds like you're going to be focused on mobile.
Yeah, we will have a really nice PWA to launch, and then ultimately we'd love for this to live in a mobile, like true mobile app. But right now it will be it's probably super performant on desktop with a really performant PWA that will be adjacent to launch. And the hope is, within a couple of months, we have a full-fledged, app ecosystem, within the Apple App Store in which all this stuff lives.
That makes sense. What do you think about consumer devices like a gaming console or something? Do you think it's unnecessary friction, or do you think it's relevant?
I think sometimes people in crypto love to overthink things, and it's like, hey, can we get something that's like it's like crypto gaming? Everyone in crypto gaming is trying to build a AAA metaverse. When it's like, hey, Web 1 gaming, Web 2 gaming, all of the iterations of gaming, the things that broke out were fun, simple, stupid, right? So like even consumer adoption, like we don't need to be like, I do like Solana's mobile approach from a phone perspective. That's really smart, right? But like I think you have to have Solana level success to go pursue the next iteration. Too many people are starting from square one and thinking like trying to go so grand and so big when you're kind of putting the cart ahead of the horse. It's like, look, let's just get something that truly breaks through, and then let's just move forward, right? Solana being the ecosystem, and a phone is smart, right? A gaming console, things like that. There's this new gaming console. My friend made it. I forget the name of it. It's like Backbone or something, but that was pretty cool. But like, I think the software is just getting there yet. So like, let's have a breakthrough software moment before like we go and the final iterations hardware. Obviously, like we're not quite there yet. I think for startup teams to be pursuing hardware, I think there's still huge market value to capture on the software side and on the digital side.
That makes sense. You're clearly very opinionated and very successful in understanding how normies or consumers should think and how they should approach a chain. What's your mental framework for that? You mentioned the barista example, which I thought was pretty cool as well. How do you think other apps, and specifically Abstract and apps building on Abstract, should approach normies and regular
I don't
people?
know. It's like little things like denominating in US dollars. You probably won't see this day one, right? But like, I think everyone should denominate in dollars. Like, why denominate in Ethereum? Doesn't make any sense, right? No one understands that, right? Like, it's like little tweaks. You'd be surprised. Crypto builders are 80% of the way there, right? They really are. They're missing really the 20%, which is like the final touch, the chef's touch, right? And you're seeing this, like, dude, a lot of guys from Web 2 are starting to come into Web 3. Builders that even guys that saw me what I did, right? Like, what is the EBITDA on Pudgy Penguins really? 150, 200 million, right? The premium that crypto gives you, right, from a ecosystem perspective is exponentially more valuable than if you were to build something in Web 2. Pudgy Penguins is a Web 2 company, is a $200 million company. Pudgy Penguins is a Web 3 company, is a $5 billion, ecosystem, and like Web 2 builders are starting to realize that, and they're not going to let, schmucks capture that value. So they, even friends who have seen what I did, they're like, oh yeah, I'm fucking stopping everything. And I'm coming in, and you're starting to see some crazy shit, right? You're starting to see guys really build. So the competition it's not going to be as easy as it once was. I mean, the last 10 years of crypto, I mean, guys literally said they invented Bitcoin and just made a coin called Bitcoin Cash and slapped it on and became billionaires. I mean, talk about the finesse. Right? Like, you really understand what's transpired these last couple of years. Dudes were leaving the Ethereum Foundation and everything they did was 10 billion bucks. Right? I mean, this era is over. Now, I still think the premium will be there, right? Because it's a growing industry. But this idea of just like fucking popping things left and right, I think is over. And you're going to actually have to win by the quality of your build. And I think you're going to see that here over the coming months. And I think a lot of people, ourselves included, are going to help set the tone as to how these things are made moving forward.
What's up, guys? Welcome back to 0x Research. Today, I'm joined by Antonio from dYdX. Thanks for coming on, Antonio.
Hey, thanks so much for having me.
With regard to the Mega Vault, how obviously there's good feedback because capital has deployed into it. How would you say is anecdotal feedback or qualitative feedback from users? Do they enjoy the process? Do they enjoy the way that it works?
I'd say so, yeah. And it's really opened dYdX up to a new class of users as well, because dYdX has always been a fairly sophisticated product as DeFi products go. It's targeted at derivatives, targeted at more professional traders. And if you go open up the websites, and the trade page is fairly complicated. But again, with the Mega Vault, it's a really easy, simple to use product. Anyone who's used DeFi should be familiar with this kind of product where you just deposit into a vault, earn some amount of APR. There's a lot of transparency with how those funds are used. So yeah, feedback has generally been good. And it has been able to provide a lot of liquidity, especially, as I mentioned, in the long tail of markets. There are software upgrades that we have planned to increase the capital efficiency of that 70 million or so that's in the vault to even more liquidity, but that's soon to come.
Perfect. And one more question about the Mega Vault. What are some of the trade-offs that it has compared to an order book?
Yeah, so like I said, AMMs are really good at providing liquidity on the long tail of markets. And again, that's a really big thing that we're focused on now at dYdX. There's currently about 160 markets that are listed on dYdX, and we're aiming to scale that to multiple hundreds, if not thousands, in the next year or two. And if you start getting into that, length of the tail of markets, it's not something that more traditional market makers are quoting right now, at least in crypto. So you really need something like an AMM. And if you look at all of the evolution of spot decentralized exchanges so far, they have obviously been really centered around AMMs with things like Uniswap and Pump Fund, Radium, etc. And now we're really bringing that for the first time in a high quality way to derivatives in DeFi as well. So we're pretty excited about that. With order books, as you mentioned, that's something that dYdX still has and has specialized in for quite a long time. And the exciting thing, I think, is having both of those on the same platform. And the way I think about it is the mega vaults with the AMMs are really good for the long tail, really good for launching markets. But then there's this natural progression of a market where it'll start primarily being quoted by an AMM. But eventually, more sophisticated market makers will come in, will quote, will provide even more liquidity. And to be able to do that, they require more sophisticated products like an order book. So with dYdX, you can have it all in one place.
Perfect. And for the instant listings, how many markets have been created and what has demand looked like on that side?
I think since we launched Unlimited, it's been around 60 or so, but there's about 500 that are available to be listed, with many more planned to come. So part of the thing that we're looking at for success is the number of markets, but another really important thing is how quickly can users add markets, and that's something that's really important to traders, obviously, especially in this day and age in crypto. When something's getting hot, you want to trade it right away, and with instant market listings, you can.
So you guys bought out Frame back in the day, and then you rebranded it to Abstract. And then there was also a bit there where it was something related to ZK Sync. I kind of just want to understand the journey and where you realize, like, this is what everything needs to end up at. I need to build out Abstract. What was that process like in your mind?
Yeah, so I met Saigar at dinner, who I think is one of the best developers in crypto. He was talking about his frustrations around community and marketing. You know, I was talking about how, like, I wanted to do something bigger for our ecosystem outside of, simply, putting putting something together that, like, we honestly are just not technical builders. So, like, I have no business putting something together like that, right? And the elephant in the room was, like, I'm super strong where they were weak, and they're super strong where I was weak. So we decided to merge forces. Obviously, the beginning stages, we understood the thesis and why we should do this. And then we started to really just debate, like, how are we going to compete and win, and how are we going to differentiate ourselves from everyone else? And as we started to do that competitive process, and as we started to kind of do that analysis and just do, like, nights and nights of hair pulling and back and forth and workshopping, we kind of came to the vision that it is today, which is like, okay, let's be the consumer chain. Clearly, crypto's in its consumer era. Whoever owns the narrative of the consumer chain is going to be wildly successful. And what does that necessarily mean? What does it mean to be consumer centric? What does it mean to put the consumer first? Right? Like, how do these all correlations come together? How are you going to compete? How are you going to beat base? Right? Why is everyone building general purpose when that contradicts entrepreneurship 101? Right? Like, doing 10 things at once leads to failure. Right? It takes just, like, unbelievable lift to do that. Why don't more people are more purpose built? What is the purpose built that has the best PMF? You come down to fun, right? What are users lacking? Why aren't people onboarding? The 0 to 1 sucks, right? Like, why does the 0 to 1 suck? Because it's an ecosystem in which you have to put pieces together, right? To use Ethereum, you got to get MetaMask. You got to go on a Uniswap. You got to put so many pieces together to make your first transaction to participate, right? That shouldn't feel like that. It should just be in one place, right? But the problem with one place in layman's terms is centralization, right? And then the Ethereum maxis have had convinced everyone, right? I think this narrative is slowly dwindling, that, like, everything needs to be decentralized. And if it's not, it's contradicting the properties of blockchain. When in reality, the properties of blockchain are global liquidity, global composability, being censorship resistance, being able to deploy and tap into this world through these rails that are not censored by, Stripe's weird terms of service, right? Like, that's the properties of blockchain. Like, the properties that make Ethereum great is that it's a decentralized network state, and that's so important. But just because Ethereum is a decentralized network state doesn't mean everyone should be building a decentralized network state, when ultimately, like, decentralization and consumer adoption are not synonymous. To be frank, they're paradoxical. They actually mean the opposite thing. Look at anything in the real world. Again, that's why I used 4chan as the example. Like, look at social networks that's decentralized, 4chan, and then look at, social networks that are centralized, Instagram. One clearly, they both have their pros and cons. We won't get into that argument. One has 1 billion users. One has a couple million, right? So like if you're going to break through, you've got to get rid of that taboo, you've got to get rid of that stigma, and you've got to say like, this is how we're going to push the boundary and succeed, and you're either going to be a part of it or you're not.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. I always think of Urbit when I think of Ethereum versus Instagram when something is more centralized. I kind of want to take a step back and talk about IP on chain, and more specifically, something that you mentioned, which is Web3. We have a tendency to not overvalue, but I guess like add a bit more of a speculative premium compared to Web2, where it would be 200, 300 mil. Web3 is 5 mil. And I want to kind of understand how because your Walmart initiative was very interesting, and I would say Pudgy's is the only NFT that has ever been able to do both Web 2 and Web 3, right? How do you think? What was your approach to that? Why do you think it worked out, and why do you think others were just not able to make it work?
Yeah, everything I do when you see me do initiatives is really to create demand and conviction, right? For the Pengu token, for the Pudgy NFTs, for the ecosystem. So like a lot of people on its face look at Walmart and be like, okay, that's cool, right? But what we really did at Walmart is a couple things. We put 2,000 pallets of Pudgy Penguin toys in 2,000 Walmarts dead center in the middle of the store during Q4, which is the most prized real estate in basically all of consumer product. The second part is every toy that was on those shelves was a toy that was licensed from the holders. They got a royalty in perpetuity. The symbolism there was epic. The third part was every toy that we sold came with a QR code where somebody scanned and they were actually able to redeem their NFTs through a gasless experience and were put on chain, right? Those were the three facets that basically, were predicated around the Walmart moment. It wasn't just simply putting toys in Walmart, which I think would have been impressive enough. Now, what we do when we do things like that, right, or when we make content, right, we're really creating demand. I'm not in the toy business. A lot of venture investors early on in our fundraise thought I was in the toy business, the IP business. Turned out to be a terrible misjudgment for them, right? But nonetheless, like we are in the demand creation business. So when I go put toys in Walmart, right, what I'm really doing is I'm creating more demand, right? More people are learning about Pudgy Penguins. More people are falling in love with Pudgy Penguins. And I'm creating more conviction with our existing holder base. Our existing holder base is really proud, right, and convicted to be a part of this ecosystem. And they don't want to sell because their kids, their nieces, their nephews, their friends, their family members are now, participating with Pudgy Penguin toys. And now it's entrenched in their everyday life and is omnipresent. Right? If I do a movie or a TV show, this thing will remain the same, right? If I do, major collaborations and more partnerships, all of that will be the same. So a lot of people kind of misinterpret really what I'm doing when I do these initiatives, right? I'm really creating more demand either for the NFT or for the token, and I'm creating more conviction for all of those holders. Because eventually, as I do those things, right, one becomes critically obvious versus the other, your other holdings become less obvious, meaning, if you hold NFTs and you hold, a couple little Pudgies and a couple of everything else, or if you hold meme coins and you hold some Pengu and you hold a couple of everything else, right? Eventually, the more times I'm omnipresent in your life, the more times I show up, you're either fiscally irresponsible or you're going to make the decision to say, hey, like, I don't know why I'm holding all these other things, right? Because one is clearly transcending, right? One is clearly omnipresent. One is clearly going outside of our echo chamber and impacting me in a positive way, which ultimately translates them into buying and holding our assets, right? And this is not like a theory. This is quite literally why we beat everyone else over the last couple of years with 100 times less money and resources than they did, right? Was because we simply followed this line of thought and we never pivoted and we never steered away, no matter what the meta or the trend was at the time, right? Because this is very simple. For all tokens, the advice to founders who are listening, you are in the supply and demand business. As long as your token's not inflationary, that is the business that you are in. It is a very simple thing to understand, right? So when you see me go and do another big partnership, when you see another headline around Pudgy Penguins, I want you to look a little deeper than the headline. I want you to think, wow, he's creating demand and he's creating conviction, right? And you do that enough times, then ultimately you have what everyone in crypto wants, that it holds a financial asset, is something that goes up and to the right.
Perfect. How do you think about brand dilution? This isn't related to the toys, but it's more so related to the fact that you guys are doing a lot, which I think is really good. And I can see how you're connecting all of them together. But is that something that you're concerned about at all?
Yeah, it was. Like, for example, we were too small to do that Walmart initiative. And if that Walmart thing would have went bad, we could have screwed the whole brand, right? We're 3 reorders in and now with Walmart, so it's deemed a complete success. Actually, at the end of 2025, because I know we'll be in Walmart until the end of 2025, my business partner, Peter, he's kind of the Walt Disney behind Pudgy. And I kind of told him, like, you have the reins, you decide what you want to do. Because we did what we needed to do to get on the radar and to push boundaries and break barriers for the space. But he has a little bit of a more, there is such thing as selling out too quickly, right? And so he really wants to rein in the brand and the culture and focus on a couple other things. So I don't know where we end up, in 2026 in terms of some of our mass market channels. I think we've proven that we've succeeded there. We're going to be basically 2.5 years in Walmart. If we decide to leave in 2026, we obviously could stay if we'd like. But it is important, and we are conscious of it. And I've given the keys of that castle to our chief creative officer, Peter, to figure that out.
How do you think the Pengu launch went? Is there anything you would have done, not just related to the Pengu launch, but over the past 2 years? Is there anything that you would have done differently? Both the Pengu launch and with Pudgy Penguins, is there anything that you were like, you know what, we should have done this instead?
I wouldn't have done anything differently.
Okay, fantastic. Last 2 questions. How do you think the L2 landscape evolves? Do you think people start copying the consumer, or like, I guess, the app focused L2?
I think we're going to set the tone. I think whatever we do here, I think every new L2 is going to follow in our footsteps in some shape, way, or form. That's just been the history of how we build for the last couple of years. It's kind of historic around, the NFT stuff, soon the meme stuff, and I think this will be no different. And I think there's going to be more top tier serious talent. I think there's way less talent, true talent and grit than I think people think. I mean, I shouldn't be able at 26 with a group of 25 and 26-year-olds shouldn't come in and outperform everyone the way that we're doing. At least, like, maybe we're just incredibly talented. Maybe I'm shooting ourselves too short, but the bar is too low when you unpack some of these things, things that are worth billions of dollars, actively worth billions of dollars, and you unpack them, you kind of are shocked. And you only can truly unpack them if you build and if you're competing. And to compete, you have to dissect, right? And so, my driving force is competition. And so based on this competition, I dissect everything. I know what everyone else is doing to the best of my knowledge. And I'm not impressed.
Do you think we'll get better talent coming in now that people know that they can make a lot of money?
Totally. I think the floodgates have been open now for like 2 months. And I think Trump was the nail in the coffin. No one's afraid anymore.
That makes sense. The last question is kind of a cope question. Do you think NFTs, apart from Pudgies, how do you think the NFT space shapes out over the next year, 2 years?
I think if marketplaces don't enforce some minimum royalty of at least 1% or more, it's going to be a hard time for NFTs to come back raging like they did in 2021. NFTs are the best form of tribalism. They're the best form of community building. They're the best form of, culture and Veblen status in the digital age. They're the best form of distribution, right? Meme coins can be bundled into smithereens and you still might not even be able to see it on bubble maps, right? NFTs are really hard to fake the distribution of. And so they're really good at identifying how big your army is on an individual basis. I think, and so the problem is with NFTs not having royalties and meme coins basically being shameless and no one's trying to report you to prison if you rug a meme coin, right? But God forbid you raise 500 grand on an NFT mint and you fail after 8 months. You're a criminal, right? You're a rug puller. It's fascinating, actually, the delineation, because people will praise, right? Like if you're a builder, I mean, Jesus, like, I don't know why you would build an NFT right now. You're either crazy, you're either a beast. You're crazy, you're a beast, or you're stupid, right? And the problem is with no royalties, it's too much of a long-term liability, right? To be frank, if I didn't spend $2.5 million on Pudgy Penguins and put my whole reputation and everything on the line, when the Black Swan events occurred and royalties went to zero, and I basically had to fund this business with another 500 grand, right? I would have probably quit. Yeah. I'm a guy who's been making millions of dollars a year since I was 18, right? Like that hell that we went through. Oh my God. There's no reason to sign up for that. There was no reason to. And so, But it starts with the royalty. This idea that the NFTs shouldn't have royalties is insane. I mean, Photon is charging you 1% on sells and 1% on buys, a 2% total rake, and you do it with a smile on your face. And not a single person has said anything to Photon, right? Why? Because the meme coins go up, right? But the problem is for NFTs to take off, you need mints to take off. Mints are the most exciting and most fun mechanism in all of crypto because of that idea of pulling a rare, right? And something more that's better than the others. And that reveal process, the dopamine is too incredible, right? So for NFTs to come back, you need mints to come back. Mints are not coming back until you have some sort of minimum viable royalty that makes some sort of financial sense, because if not, the long-term liability is too great. Now, there'll still be outliers. I think we will be an outlier. I still think Pudgy Penguin NFTs in our ecosystem will continue to perform because I've cracked that code and I've developed that trust with the community and the people outside of the community, right? So when I say something, people really galvanize around it. There's maybe 1 or 2 teams who will probably be in the same bucket in the same boat, right? Specifically for our team, I think we're in the league of our own. But Pudgy Penguins is not single-handedly going to bring an NFT bull market if the cons are still the cons that I had mentioned. But the first way to alleviate those cons is some sort of minimum viable royalty. And I do not think that royalty is 5 to 10%. I think that was egregious. That is completely extractive and that's not beneficial, right? I think 1% is the minimum viable number. And I think that should be available across the board. And I think that's fair. And I know the math. And if you're a small creator, it can make sense, or at least it can give you a future potential for it to make sense. But nobody was crying when they were getting 5% on their friend techs. When everyone was getting the 5% royalty, no one gave a shit, right? Friend tech was hot, right? And so royalties were never the problem. They're actually now the problem now that they don't exist. So it's up to OpenSea and Magic Eden and Blur to listen to this. Hopefully you clip it and post it and tag them. I've been right on everything for the last couple of years. I've been saying this for the last couple of years. I mean, it's so clear as day. That's why our whole incentive program around Abstact is really focused on content creators and streamers, because I know what it is to benefit that. Right? NFTs were amazing because all the content creators and all the artists were coming and bringing their people into the space. It was only until that stopped happening that the flywheel and the excitement around NFT stop, right? I think Ethereum, and if Ethereum wants to come back the way that it was, don't underestimate the NFT top and the Ethereum price top, truly, right? Like, don't underestimate that correlation. Put the 2 charts together. I think you'll tell an interesting story. Also, look at when NFTs took off and Ethereum's price. Look at the correlation between the two. It's evidently clear. Look at Solana's price versus the meme coin craze. It's so parallel and so obvious. I mean, a first grader could understand it. Yeah, for some reason, all these amazing teams with fucking multi-billion-dollar valuations and 9 figures in cash don't really understand the business that they're in, which is the content creator business. It's fascinating to say the least. I hope one of these days I could be at the leadership helm of one of these NFT marketplaces so I could show them all how it's done.
That was a very good. Honestly, almost brought a tear to my eye because I really miss NFTs. I like NFTs. It was just so much more fun than meme coins, and I agree with you. If you're paying, it's not even 1% because you're also paying priority fees, everything. It doesn't make any sense to. Yeah, I'm hoping so as well. Okay, I think that's it. Luca, thank you so much for coming on, man. I really appreciate it.
I appreciate you having me.
Before actually we go off, do you want to tell people where they should head to find out more about Abstract Chain and about you and about the
Just follow Abstract Chain on X. Just spell it out. Luca Netz on X. Pudgy Penguins on X. Stay tuned.